Good morning, everyone. This is Gray, followed by something, and I'm here to do my top 20 black and white films. So, what I'm going to do is I'm not going to worry about rating them until I get to the top 5, because I love them all equally well, and I'll just do a top 5, going down best and worst and all that stuff. And like everyone else is saying, I'm not the American Film Institute, and I'm not trying to make some sort of a definitive list of the all-time best black and white films. This is simply, these are a group of films that I like. This is a group of films that I like, and it could also change tomorrow, but okay. Anyway, and most of them I've talked about before. It occurred to me when I was putting this together that I seem to be talking about the same films again and again, so either I start buying more things and add to my collection, or I just shut the hell up. All right. So starting off at number 20 and number 19, I picked these two wonderful silent films directed by the German director G.W. Pabst, and they both star the marvelous American actress Louise Brooks. One is Pandora's Box, made about 1928, and that's followed by Diary of a Lost Girl, which was made soon after. And I'm choosing these not only because they are great films, but because the black and white expressionistic cinematography is just so very impressive. And also because I feel that Louise Brooks is an actress that was made for black and white cinematography, just with her shiny black hair, her porcelain skin, her very expressive dark eyes. She never made a film in color, and I just can't imagine seeing her in a color film. I think that she was probably at her best doing this kind of thing. All right. So for the next one, I'm going to have a tie between two of these classic horror films, Frankenstein and Dracula, because I honestly can't pick one over the other. And I love all of the Universal films, the ones starting out in the 30s and going all the way into the 1940s and even later. But yeah, these were kind of the beginning of the whole thing. If you could also include The Mummy, that was another classic. And I think that of the two films, Frankenstein holds its sense of excitement and movement a lot better than Dracula. And I think that's because James Whale, who directed Frankenstein, is a much better director of sound films than was Todd Browning, who still had one foot back in the silent era. But you still can't, I mean, you can't say enough about the opening sequence, and especially when Bela Lugosi is walking down that staircase. The movie tends to slow down and get very stagey after about the first, well, certainly after the first half, maybe the first 1/3, really, and it's kind of slow after that. But I think Frankenstein holds his excitement all through until the very end. All right, and continuing in the 1930s, I'd like to show you a film starring Bette Davis, and I love to talk about Bette Davis, and I could probably do a whole video, a couple hours just talking about her. But this is a film called Jezebel. Released in 1938, it gave Bette Davis her second Academy Award, directed by William Wyler. And this is kind of a precursor to Gone with the Wind, which came out a year later. It's about a fiery Southern belle, very headstrong, rebellious, and Bette Davis, I think she was a great heroine in this. And a reason for picking this as a black and white movie is because there's a plot point in this film where Bette Davis's character decides to wear this bright red dress, this very considered to be a vulgar red color in that time and place, to a dance, a formal dance called the Olympus Ball that they were having in New Orleans, where this takes place, where every unmarried young woman is supposed to wear white. That's the tradition. Wearing any kind of a color would be considered inappropriate. Wearing something bright red would mean that she's looking like a harlot. So she does this in order to embarrass her fiancé, played by Henry Fonda, who was also very good in this. And the scene in which she has on the red dress, and then they start dancing, and everybody else clears the floor. Well, of course, the viewer is not looking at this in color, but in the imagination, as Bette Davis said this many years later in talking about Jezebel and why it was in black and white and not in color, she said, "You knew that dress was red." And indeed you did, because the imagination comes to play. It's a fantastic movie. Highly recommend it to everybody who is interested in Bette Davis's early career. Please write this down. And continuing with another Bette Davis classic from 1940, this is The Letter. Again, directed by William Wyler. Another Oscar nomination for Bette Davis as Best Actress, playing a completely different kind of character than she did in Jezebel. But the reason I'm picking this is because this is an early example of film noir lighting. And the opening sequence in this film has it takes place in Singapore, and there's a bungalow set back into the kind of in the woods, and it's a very quiet, peaceful night, and all of a sudden you hear a gunshot from inside the bungalow, and then silence once again, and then a man staggers out of the bungalow. You can tell that he's been shot. He's trying to walk down the porch and get away, and then Bette Davis comes out with a gun, and she fires four more shots into him, and then she just stands there holding the gun and looking down at him. And then while this is happening, the clouds are passing over the moon, and it's very dark. And then right after she's done killing this guy, the moon is made clear, and the brightness startles her so much that she turns around to look at the moon, close up of her face, eyes big as saucers, and it symbolizes the idea that everything that you do in the dark is going to be brought to light, right? You can't hide anything, and that theme is played throughout the film. It's really a beautiful film to look at. All right. Also, Casablanca from the year 1943, marvelous film. I can't imagine anybody not liking this film. And I can't imagine what Ted Turner was thinking of back in the 80s when he wanted to colorize this. It's almost like a crime, you know? Okay, great ghost story called The Uninvited from the year 1944. I love this movie. And also, here's a classic film from 1945 called Laura. Not only a great film, but one of the best film noirs ever made. And the cinematography is absolutely outstanding. It's almost as though as the camera moves around these beautifully designed set pieces, which are Laura's apartment and the apartment of another character, almost everything could be a perfectly staged still photograph. This is a beautiful film to look at. If you haven't seen it, put it on your list. Okay, another black and white film that I love, All About Eve, 1950. What can I say? I've talked about this many times, so I won't talk about it anymore, but it is a great film. Okay, and moving on. Okay, this is a group of films, and again, I'm not going to try to rate these. I'm just going to talk about films that I love. And here's a film by John Cassavetes called Faces, released in 1968. This is a film that he worked on for many years, trying to get it together. Cassavetes was an independent filmmaker who used his own home, his family. He wrote all of his own dialogue and wanted everything to be independent. So he would work through the years and take acting jobs to make money to complete his films. And this is a marvelous film, starring Gena Rowlands, John Marley, Seymour Cassel, and it's very well, it comes off as being totally realistic, as if these are real people just talking to each other and going through these bad relationships and decaying marriages and all this stuff. And yeah, Gena Rowlands has probably never been better than she was in this. Okay. Seconds by John Frankenheimer, 1966, starring Rock Hudson, and this is wonderful. For me, this was a blind buy back in sometime in the 90s. Whenever this first came out on DVD, I knew nothing about it, and it soon became one of my favorite films of all time. And I'm so grateful that I could turn James Higgins onto this, because he's become kind of a champion of this movie, and I'd like to recommend it. If you haven't seen it, please write it down. Okay. More Bette Davis. All right. This is Whatever Happened to Baby Jane from the year 1962, also starring Joan Crawford. Now, this is interesting on many levels because it was the beginning of a series of psychological horror films starring aging actresses like Bette Davis, Joan Crawford, Olivia de Havilland, Agnes Moorehead, Mary Astor, and this was the one that started it all. Great characterizations by these two actresses, and it's great for lovers of old Hollywood because it's a Hollywood story. It's about these two actresses, these two sisters living in this old gloomy mansion filled with secrets and passions and hatred and regret. And it also, at the beginning of the film, it shows scenes from some of their early movies to show what they were like when they were young. And for Joan Crawford, they show a scene from a film called Sadie McKee back in 1934. For Bette Davis, they show two scenes, one from a movie called Parachute Jumper, which she hated, from 1932, and another one from 1933 called Ex-Lady, another movie she hated. So, I don't know, this is just wonderful. And Bette Davis was nominated for an Academy Award. It was her last nomination. Okay, going on to a Woody Allen film that I love. This is Manhattan, released in 1979. And I'm not sure, because I haven't seen a lot of Woody Allen's early movies, but I think this may have been the first time he worked in black and white. And this was the film that he made right after he had this big hit with Annie Hall, which was made in color, and it was a very, very popular movie and won a lot of Oscars. But then he made this incredible character study almost, using the city of Manhattan as a character in the film, which is, it's really beautiful to look at. Okay, another film from, I think, the early 1980s, either 80 or 81, directed by Jim Jarmusch. This is Stranger Than Paradise, which really is, I can't possibly explain this except that no other movie has ever made Cleveland, Ohio look like a surreal David Lynch landscape. This is a very funny movie and just totally in a class by itself. Okay. Once again, Fellini's 8½, truly one of the best films ever made, and also well known for the way it looked, the cinematography. 1963. I've already talked about this in a recent video, so I won't go on and on. So now I'm up to my top 5. Here we go. Number 5 is Sunset Boulevard, starring Gloria Swanson and William Holden, directed by Billy Wilder in 1950. And this is not only a story about Hollywood, but it's also done as a film noir. And the look of it is absolutely incredible. If you've never seen this, just looking at the inside of this actress's mansion and all the stuff she has cluttered around, I mean, it's just an amazing set piece. All right. Okay. This is The Innocence from 1961, directed by Jack Clayton, starring Deborah Kerr, and this is an adaptation of the Henry James novella, The Turn of the Screw. And it's very psychosexual, weird, and I remember seeing this when I was a kid. Of course, I couldn't have gotten all that stuff, but it did have a very kind of a sordid, morbid fascination to it even then, but the cinematography is absolutely incredible. All right. Then we go to another horror film. This is from 1963, The Haunting, directed by Robert Wise. This one stars Julie Harris, Claire Bloom, Russ Tamblyn, and Richard Johnson. And I can't imagine... Well, this was remade many, many years later with a really bad movie. But I can't imagine this being in color. And just everything about this is just... The creepiness never goes away no matter how many times you see this. It's just a brilliant, and very frightening film. And it proves the fact that sometimes what you don't see and what your imagination brings to the forefront is a lot more frightening than what you actually do see. Okay, film number 2. Number 2. I'm trying to do this very quickly because I have to get out of here and go someplace. This is Mario Bava's Black Sunday. Of course, I've talked about this many times, and no discussion of black and white cinematography would be complete without mentioning this film. And what he was able to do on a very low budget with not that many resources and a set that was completely, it was an indoor set, completely created, but he made it look like he was, he just made it look so real. But it also has a lot of surrealistic and expressionistic touches to it. And of course, Barbara Steele is the star, and she is another actress, kind of like Louise Brooks, whom I think that she is framed more beautifully in black and white than she is in color. And early in her career, she was described as having eyes that look, when they were filmed in black and white, they film as liquid Italian black. Actually, her eyes are green, but they just, the way she looks, the sequence early in the film where the executioner is carrying the metal mask and heading toward her face, and then you show a close-up of her face with her eyes like this, and it's just, she was born to do stuff like this. All right, and my number 1 film for black and white cinematography is Night of the Hunter. The Night of the Hunter, 1955, directed by Charles Laughton, starring Robert Mitchum. I've talked about this many times. Not enough can ever be said about this film because it is just totally unique. It's in a class completely by itself. It is unclassifiable, part fairy tale, part film noir, part melodrama, and it's just absolutely brilliant. I never get tired of watching this. And for those of you who have not yet seen this, what are you waiting for? Okay, those are my 20 films. Comments are welcome. Thank you for watching.